And the next thing we're going to do is declare, a lot of declaring and setting. Declare a variable that can be assigned to the default slide state. Now, when I first looked at this, I thought this was kind of confusing, all this declaring and setting. But if you see, we're here first letting E prime know, hey, I want you to point to the reply slide. I want you to look at the reply slide. Well, if you open up the reply slide, there's quite a bit going on here, even if you don't realize it. There's a couple different text box. There's just a lot going on, and E prime really wouldn't know where exactly to look. So now with this next line of script, we're going even further in specifying to E prime of where to gather the response data, where to get the information from the reply slide. So we're going to now declare the state as slide state, and you'll see that that shows up right here. So that's something you can set with scripting in eBasic. We're going to set the state as slide state, and then, and what that basically means is it's letting E prime know that we're going to now set the state, which there can be multiple states here. If you have added any slide states up here, for example, if you add another one, and that'd be state 1 or state 2 or state 3. So these are the states that we're looking at. But for us, we're just looking at the first default one. So we're letting E prime know that the slide state needs to be set. So set the state equal to the slide dot state states dot item, and then the item is going to be default. So if you remember, that's this slide state that we wanted to focus on was this first one, and the name of that is default. You can always change the name of the states if you would like, but for this we have it set to default. You can change them here, but the active state is default, so we're letting E prime know that this is the state we want you to focus on for the response. The next thing we're going to declare, a lot of declaring here because we're doing this huge loop and we want to make sure that E prime knows how to save these responses and handle them with just only by using script. So now we're going to declare a variable that can be assigned to the slide text sub object. So now we're even getting more specific, that will be altered based on the subject's response. Now what that means, it's basically going to look at this specific area on the reply slide, on the default slide. So we've gotten even further with the specification of what we're focusing on, and you'll notice that there are 3 different text boxes on here, but these are actually giving information to the participant. Please type some text, please enter here. So the text that's open for the collecting the response information by the participant would be this text 2 box. As you see, I highlighted, it shows me that it's text 2. So we want to let E prime know that we want you to collect or kind of focus on that slide text. So we need to declare a variable for that. So we're going to dim the slide text as slide text. You'll see that shows up as well as an option. And now that that's a variable, we're going to actually set the slide text. Oops. Sometimes I put spaces where you don't need spaces. The slide text. That's why it's good we're typing it out together so you can kind of see the specific way I'm typing it. But now we're going to set the slide text equal, and we're going to now cast, similar to what we did up here with the reply. We're going to use cast for the slide text, and we're actually going to cast the state objects and setting it to text 2. So just like we had e' look at the assigned reply slide, we're going to have them focus on the slide state and then declaring another variable to have them assign this to the text 2 box. Now we're going to access or assess the subject's response. And by doing that, we're going to change the text and background. So this is actually going to show you all the different things that we can do with scripting in terms of the text and the information given by the participant. Text background color as appropriate, and change the text itself to display the new response count. I think I should make this a little bit a lot of comments here, but that will be helpful later when you want to reference this, if you want to play around with it. And change the text itself to display the new response count. Then you're also going to have e' redraw the slide so the changes appear to the subject. So it's kind of like an echo client, but we're using script. We're going to basically take the response given by the participant, change it in terms of the text and the color, and then we're going to display that back and redraw that back to the slide so that the participant can see it. And then select case the response data.rsp. This is just telling us that we're going to select the response data, I think. Let me close these out. Okay, those are just comments for you to kind of follow along. And now you're going to counter variable. So you're going to first declare dim I as integer. Oops. And then you need to now have e' count basically each thing that could be typed. So the number of characters in the space bar is set with a constant of equals 7. And then the next thing is number of characters in a period. Oops. And that is set constant to period equals 3. Because this actually, in eBasic, we have a way to look at how e' scripting accepts characters. So if you go to the key, I believe it's the key naming scheme right here. This is a really important article. I definitely recommend taking a look at this in eBasic. It talks about the way the naming scheme in e'. So e' provides basically a definition for each character, and these are how they're accepted in e'. So if you want a, let's suppose the participant to press / or if you want the caps lock to be recognized or the enter key, it needs to be written exactly like this in e' with the parentheses and with the capitalization. And here it talks about how to use a mouse as well as some other devices that you can externally connect to e'. And then you need to reference in script or in your actual e' experiment how the responses will be accepted. So you need to write it in this particular way. So this article is really great. So here it's actually showing that when space is accepted, it's going to be 7 characters because of the parentheses. And then you're going to also look at the number of characters in space, so you want to be able to register if the participant uses backspace as well. And that constant, you'll see we're using the same back equals 11. Oops. So you'll see that E prime, if you put it over here, these are all objects defining how to register these. So how to register the space bar, how to register a period, and how to register the backspace by E prime. And 11 is because 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So including the parentheses, the way backspace is registered, it's a constant number of 11, 11 presses. Now we're going to actually begin parsing subjects response. So for I equals 1 to len, that basically is letting E prime know that we're looking at the response data dot response. RESP right here, and close that. So this line is letting E prime know that we want to now process a response. And we're going to also account for special characters. And what that means is if the response data dot response is I 1 equals then, and now we're going to account for the special characters. If the response data dot resp and ln space so now this is setting E prime to register and how to basically re-show what's typed as well. String answer, we're going to do plus and then -1. So that little bit of script is actually just accounting for the space bar and allowing E prime to know, so that we've actually set the space bar up here, but then we're going to also reference that if the response is given and the space bar is used, then you're going to basically allow E prime to register that using this line of script. So we have to do the same thing now for a period. And I apologize if the indentation is a little bit off. I'm trying to stay as organized as possible while I type all this. But account for period, and then we're going to do else if. So if the response also has period equals, and then you have to reference it with the quotes as well as the parentheses. Then, oops, yeah, the then goes there. Then we're going to do the same thing with answer equals string answer plus I plus so basically we did the same thing that we did with the space bar, allowing e prime to register that. Now another else if that we want to do is setting the string answer if it's more than 0 and the response data dot equals backspace. So these are the special things that might, we want to actually let e prime know to register, meaning the period, the backspace, as well as the space bar. Then, now we're actually going to subtract 1 from the current length, then return that number of characters. So we do that by using this equals grans minus 1. And as I mentioned before, it's important each time to, if you were typing this on your own, kind of take a break when you write. We're doing this huge loop right now, but once we actually get through most of the loop, it would be good to generate and even run through the experiment to make sure the script is accepted correctly. So now we've actually subtracted 1 from the current length. I'm sure I have so many typos. And then return that number of characters. So now we're going to set I equals I plus, and now we're going to do back minus 1. Now since the shift key and enter key have the same amount of characters as space, the else accounts for them as well. And note that you do not need to do, you don't need to add anything to the string variable when you encounter a shift or enter. So this is just a little FYI because shift and enter have the same amount as the other, as space. So you don't need to actually define those special characters. But we're going to do an else here and do I equals plus 6. And then we're going to do end if. So these are just the special characters. We want to make sure that e prime can recognize these, meaning the period, the space, and the backspace. So this script actually allows that to happen. And then we did the end if because we're doing if then. If these responses are given, basically you're going to use a string answer and set it equal to this information. That's how eBasic will register it. Now we actually want to account for normal input. Now these are the things that are not special characters. So we're going to do else and do the string answer equals string answer plus, and we're going to actually do the response data dot our response. apologize for that. I just wanted to bring up that we actually do have, for the mid function, this is actually returns a specific string that you need, or returns information that you need. That's why we're actually using the mid here, because we want something returned when the response data is collected from the participant. So I just wanted to clarify why mid is used. Okay, now that we have the normal input for whatever else is typed taken into consideration as well, we want to finish the response data response, set it to I and 1, and then end if. So anything else that's typed will also be accepted in this loop. And then we're going to do next I, and end if. So it's very important that you have enough end ifs. You'll remember up here we had this big if then. So now we're closing that one out as well. That's why it's important to follow these lines here. It kind of helps with the way eBasic is set up. It kind of makes it easy to have the bits of script together, because we have a lot of users sometimes send in their experiments and they're getting an end if that's missing. So they'll get an error message, and we kind of have to go through line by line to make sure they have enough if they have enough end ifs with their if then statements. So that's why we have multiple end ifs here to close out varying lines of script that are in here with an if-then statement. So now we're going to actually set an attribute for replaying the response to the subject. So we talked about collecting the data and then replaying it. So to do that, we're going to use set attribute, so set attrib, and we're going to set the attribute replay att, and that's going to be the attribute we use for the information, and we're going to set that attribute to string answer. Then we're going to actually use c.setAttrib stimulus dot response, and then the response data dot resp. Now we're going to focus on the slide text dot text. If you remember, we're looking at the specific text box, and we're going to collect the string answer from there. And then we're going to allow it to draw to the screen. So that's where you set the slide.draw. And this allows it to display to the screen. And then we're going to do a nice end if. And actually, this I think was supposed to be all indented, because we want to now close off the loop that we did. So we'll now end the loop. So another thing that we recommend with the loop statements actually is, if you can, if there's a pretty big loop in there, you want to give some time back. So this is actually required. If you think E prime is actually running this huge loop in the background and collecting all the responses given and then changing the information and displaying it back to the screen, so this can take quite a bit of time up if it's continuously generating the script in the background. Now, one thing, because you're not using pre-release and you're not using generate pre-run, one thing you can do is put a sleep statement in here. So if I put sleep 10, what this basically does is it lets E prime sleep for about 10 milliseconds right after this loop is run, giving basically it a little breather, a little break. Now, one thing to keep in mind with the sleep statements, we do recommend having these here so that your script generates smoothly without any issues, but it will just log a onset delay for the next object. And to get around that onset delay, I recommend checking out the article Set Next Target Onset Time. This allows you, if you're concerned with the onset delay, to actually set when the next onset time will be, so you can play around with that so that you don't get a delay. But this will just give a little tiny millisecond delay in your data file, but it will allow this huge loop to run smoothly without any hiccups by having that little 10 millisecond break in there. And then we'll do events. And now the last thing we need to do here is log the response to the context. And what this allows is it uses setAttrib, the response object dot name and dot response .resp. That's actually allowing ePrime to set these attributes, the response object dot name, and we're going to do not only the response, but we actually want to do the reaction time, RT, and we're focusing here on the response count of the response data.rt. So this allows ePrime to log the responses to the context of what you need. And I think that's pretty much the input mask that we wanted to cover. The important thing to remember is casting that I mentioned before. You can actually use casting and you can actually change. So here we've actually taken the response by the reply slide and echoed it and kind of changed it and then echoed it back to the participant. Another thing that is common is people want to map the keyboard of ePrime because it's, you know, if they don't want to use English in their experiment, they can also map the keyboard, which we have in this sample as well for you to take a look at. This is just an example of changing the input mask and what response is given using the if-then statement similar to what we did before, and collecting the response and changing the response to a foreign character. We do have sample experiments as well on our in our samples on our website if you are interested in mapping your keyboard to a foreign language. We do have that available as well, that sample experiment. So now that we've actually taken a look at this reply slide and the input given and then changed it basically very specifically line by line, also registered special characters of, you know, periods and space bars, accounting for all of that. We will now, I definitely recommend saving it, of course, and then generating and running the experiment. And if you have any questions, you can submit a support request. And going back to my presentation, I would like to just answer the last few questions that we had. How can you handle response devices in script? Well, what we did is we actually directly related an input mask or device by using script to point to the specific input mask or object. In this sample, we did the reply slide. We had the script point specifically to where we wanted the response to be collected from. And then you can also handle the response of the device. So if you are using a joystick or a keyboard, or you want to change or manipulate your keyboard, you can also work with the devices as well. With using input mask handling, first you have to set the conditions that need to be met globally. So if you remember, we made sure that the reply slide had a duration of 0, that the pre-release was 0, as well as some other warning messages that we had set in there. And then that will help the script work correctly if we have those things met. And then you're going to reference the object in script. So this is where we had it set to 0 for the duration. And then we specifically reference the reply slide and then this default state of the slide and then the text box that was on that reply slide. So whatever response was given, ePrime knew to look there for the input mask. Device handling, I mentioned response data today. That's what we kind of dealt with, the response given by the participant. You can also look at the keyboard response data or the mouse or joystick, and those are covered in eBasic Help as well. Some important final points I wanted to mention deal with what I kind of my take-home points here, of course, is to make sure pre-release is set to 0 when you're using an inline script on your procedures. Also, please make sure to have generate pre-run set to before object run. Those are on your procedures property pages. And also, as common practice, generate and compile your work with script to avoid errors. Today we didn't do that. I couldn't run through the experiment because of the recording of the presentation, but typically I would do a couple lines of script and then generate it to make sure that it's the syntax is correct. And of course, if you have any questions, we recommend checking out our support site. You can submit a support request there. As a registered user, you can get in touch with a consultant here who can help you with any questions you may have about the webinar, or if you have any questions specific to your experiment design, you can let us know, and you can also attach any files that you may have. So thank you for watching this presentation, and please contact us here at PST if you have any questions.